This is Ryan Pierce, host of Completely Serious. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hi friends, this is Jeffrey Childs, host of The Cheap Seats, right here on Public House Media. I want to thank you for listening to this following broadcast on Public House Media. And once you're done listening to this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, The Cheap Seats, hosted with Max Wolpoff. We'll talk about the craziest stories in sports, our insight, fresh perspective that you can't get anywhere else. A new show comes out weekly, each Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Don't forget, subscribe on iTunes so that you never miss an episode of The Cheap Seats. You might be in the nosebleed section, but this is one of the best perspectives in the wide world of sports. Thank you again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Today's verse of the day comes from Jeremiah 1:5. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. Good morning. Welcome to another edition of the Verse of the Day podcast here on Public House Media. Happy Saturday, the weekend, getting ready to relax, whatever plans you may have in store for you and yourself and your family and anyone else that you are going to be spending time with this weekend. I hope they're blessed and that you enjoy the time and get a little rest as well, too. I know the weekends can sometimes be that time for us where we are just so excited to finally get to that to-do list that has just been nagging at us all week, and we forget to finally take a little time for ourselves. So I encourage you to do a little bit of that this weekend if you are able to. I know life gets in the way, so obviously be responsible about that. But hey, we all have a tank that needs to be refilled, so don't forget to do that this weekend if you can do so. A couple of reminders for you today, of course. As we always do, a reminder that you can download the show by going to iTunes and Google Podcasts. It's also available over on Spreaker.com, thephmedia.com, and iHeartRadio as well. If you are interested in keeping up with the show on a daily basis, you can find us on social media. We're over on Facebook and Instagram. Just search for Verse of the Day Podcast, and you'll see the show pop up. Give us a follow, give us a like. Invite your friends to do so as well, too. It's great to see that our community keeps growing on both Facebook and Instagram for you. And we're just very blessed by that. So thank you for taking your time to do that. And, of course, if you have a verse to submit that you'd like us to be able to do here on the show, which we have a submitted verse today, you can do so by either sending us a message on Facebook or Instagram, or by sending us an email at verseofthedaypod@gmail.com. Today's verse of the day does come courtesy of Jessica, so a big thank you to Jessica for the recommendation to take a look at Jeremiah 1:5. The words of Jeremiah 1:5 come straight from the lips of God. We see this right away in verse 4. It says, "The word of the Lord came to me saying," and then obviously we hear what we hear here in verse 5. Now listen to what happens in verses 6 and 7 and tell me if this reminds you of anybody. "Alas, sovereign Lord, I said," this is Jeremiah talking, "I do not know how to speak. I am too young. But the Lord said to me, do not say I am too young. You must go to everyone I send to you, or send you to, and say whatever I command you." Does this sound like anybody that you may have heard before in the Bible? I know that sounds like somebody that has been very notable throughout the history of the Bible. Somebody named Moses could potentially be one answer. Moses was not a good speaker and was told that, and the Lord told him, and he told the Lord to pick somebody else to go speak to the Egyptians. Countless others in the Bible have been chosen by God to do his work, and many others as well too, but most of them fought God on his choice of using them right from the start. We hear about Gideon, we hear about many other countless people that denied, not necessarily in a mean way, but just were so taken aback that God would choose them for his plan. I myself have fought God and did that with his call to have me step deeper into the world of ministry, between doing this show, which I seriously never thought I would ever do, to going back to school to study to become a pastor. Both paths took a long time for me to finally surrender my heart over to God. But, do I know exactly what God has in plan for me for this show or for me as a pastor? No, I don't. But what I do know is that God knew all about his plan for me and each one of you that are listening before any of us were ever even born. We get lost in today's society. The teen suicide rate is just unbelievable right now. We hear about drugs and drinking and premarital sex, and the constant want to just fit in just dominates our minds, and it causes a lot of confusion, poor judgment, and emotional damage as well. Finding good friends is hard. Finding people that build us up rather than tear us down is even harder, unfortunately. Now, I don't know how many of you have seen the movie Wonder. I recently had the opportunity to watch this with my family, but there are a lot of parallels in this movie talking about the main character, Augie, to us as Christians and how we are treated in today's world. Augie has now without giving away too much of the movie, was born with facial deformities, and it doesn't look like a quote-unquote normal human being. And he's teased a lot for it, and he's really just given the runaround and bullied and just the typical things you would assume that middle school kids would do to somebody that doesn't look quote-unquote normal. I think this is a lot very similar to how we as Christians are treated in today's society as well, too. We are treated as outcasts. We are treated as weird-looking. We are treated as radicals because we aren't conformed to the things of this world. But once people begin to hear about the amazing salvation God has to offer, usually one of two things happen. You either see people that will start to embrace it, kind of like in the movie where we see Summer and Jay Will both embrace the friendships of Augie, or they will fight it, and oftentimes it's a little too late for them when it comes to obtaining that salvation until they realize that later on, like we kind of see in the movie from how Julian treats Augie. Jeremiah in today's verse of the day is the son of a priest, Hilkiah. Now, God is coming to Jeremiah and telling him that he will be this mighty prophet that will be over all nations and all kingdoms. We see this in verse 10. Talk about pressure for a guy. Not only is his father a priest, but now God himself is coming to Jeremiah and telling him, hey, by the way, I'm going to make you this prophet that is going to be in charge over all nations and all kingdoms. We will be put against what seem like impossible tasks during our life here on earth. We are going to fail and mess up. Before we were born, God chose each of us for a very special purpose. Each of us carries a different story and responsibility. We know this. Today, where do you feel, though, God is pulling you in your walk with him? And into what areas of your life? Sometimes that feeling we get of nervousness or anxiety are because we know that something that is scary can oftentimes be a major leap of faith for us in trusting in God's plan for our lives. But because we put our faith in a divine being that we cannot see or touch, we struggle to take the leap and trust God's plan for us. Don't worry, though. If you're thinking you're the only one that's struggling, you are far from alone. Trust me on this. While God might not be calling you to lead an entire nation like he did for Jeremiah, he has already laid the foundation for an amazing journey for you. Your job is simple. Let go of your worldly fears and place your trust in the plans God has masterfully and wonderfully designed just for you. And oh, the places you will go. You've been listening to the Verse of the Day podcast hosted by Baxter Colburn on Public House Media. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Verse of the Day. It comes out 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The podcast can be found by subscribing on Google Play Podcasts and wherever good podcasts are found. More information about Verse of the Day podcast can be found by going to thephmedia.com.